Just so helpful, Lord, and whether it's formal or whether it's casual, Lord, our desire is just to be a minister to others and to share the blessing of marriage with others, Lord, we pray. And so be with us for your purposes for each one of us here. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I've drug out a few programs that I recommend. Basically, if you are in premarital, and it's a proper premarital in the best sense of the word, you have two young people that have been pure or pretty pure. One of actually the best book on biblical sex for these couples is it's by Tim and Bev LaHaye, and it's called The Act of Marriage. It's also a good book when people's sex life have gotten skewed or perverse. And unfortunately today, and especially dealing with young people, pornography has become such a part of our culture and kids' lives that you find even Christian young couples will go and they find themselves in a perverse way. I've had over the years situations where the man for 10, 12 years of marriage was clueless on pleasing his wife, and it was such a weird topic that she never talked to him about it. So she was never satisfied in marriage. He never really thought about it. And she ended up having an affair. And she goes, it was wonderful. The guy knew how to treat me. And the marriage ended in divorce. It didn't have to. I mean, he pushed her there, and he finally learned it, but he was so angry. I mean, he was a part of it. He just didn't listen. He didn't care enough about his wife to know if she was satisfied within sex. So Tim and Bev LaHaye, The Act of Marriage. Best, most respectful, but very clear, technical on how our bodies work and everything else. My daughter and her husband were virgins when they got married, and they read the book together, and it was awesome for them, And I asked her, how are things going without any details? She's like, great, Dad, we're good. I don't want to know details. That's my daughter, But I do, in any marriage, that is a part of it. And this world is so screwed up, we assume so many things, Another book on romance, not necessarily intimacy, the physical intimacy, but more like kind of on romance. I love Chuck Swindoll, incredibly great communicator, and he has a book, and I don't even know if it's still in print, but it's Strike the Original Match. Whole romance side, we mess up because women have huge expectations and men are clueless half the time. That's a general statement, but it's kind of where we go. Men don't get it, and then even as women are more emotionally based in the sexual relationship, men are physically based. So pornography is a problem for men, and they're visually based. But I would say romance novels are a problem for women too, because it's emotional pornography. It's setting an unreal expectation in a world that no man ever met. They're fictional characters, right? And if a man meets it, he only meets it, to try to pick up a girl. But no man is ever that person, right? And so these things are things to look for, in the marriages and the expectations, so on and so forth. So those two books, Striking the Original Match by Swindoll and The Act of Marriage by Tim and Bev LaHaye. And I've bought probably 10 of those books, 15 of those books over time, and I looked in my office, I couldn't find one. So, okay, I've given that one away also. As far as basic marriage, people have been married for a while, they're trying to figure it out, and you're ministering into their marriage. There's a man named Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, Eggerichs, Eggerich. And the name of the book, they also have a DVD series. We actually have a few of these floating around our church. If people need to go through them, they don't always come back. I think we had 5 at one time. This was the only one I found. But it's called The Crazy Cycle. The Crazy Cycle. And really what it does is it talks about Ephesians chapter 5 is the basic premise. The man wants respect. The woman wants love and cherishing. If the man doesn't cherish the woman, she disrespects the husband. Now she's not lovable, so he doesn't cherish her, and it just goes back and forth, and it does this. It's like what a toilet does. It's going down, right? So that's a really good one. A lot of psychological words and stuff, but the basic premise is awesome. What I loved about this was when we went through it as a church, and it was very cumbersome to go through in a large group of people. So I recommend people going through it alone or with one other couple. But for me, what I really loved about it is I was teaching this idea of the husband's greatest value is respect, and the woman's greatest value is love, shown in the very practical form of security in her husband's love. Like, husbands, love your wives like Christ loves the church, which means bad day or good day, she's loved. Whether she gained 10 pounds or just had a baby, she's loved. Whether she's gone through menopause, she's loved. Whether she develops, crow's, feet on the edge of it, she's still loved, right? That security of being loved by the Lord, makes a woman flourish. And so I've always, I taught that for many years, and then all of a sudden we ran into this. I'm like, oh, okay, he's done seminars on that. That's good. So this is something. Another one that's not a Calvary style written and a little bit more psychology in it, but it's really good and very thorough, and I recommend him for most things on marriage, is Wayne Mack. And this one's called Strengthening Your Marriage. We've gone through this with the church as well. It was really good. He gives a lot of worksheets, which can be really good. The problem with worksheets, when you've been married and you're getting along, they're great and you laugh. And when you're not getting along, you tend to fight over them. So just got to be careful with the worksheets, right? That's when you know a marriage has gotten healthy, right? Because a lot of things do change and some things don't. And when you come to the point of accepting those things that don't, and you can joke or laugh about them, or things that you used to fight over that you now laugh over, right? It's like, you're getting pretty healthy. But Wayne A. Mack, Strengthening Your Marriage. He also has a premarital series. I haven't finished going through it, but it's good stuff. And then my favorite is the guy that wrote this curriculum that we're going through, Married and How to Stay That Way by Steve Carr. Okay. Married and How to Stay That Way. It's like a textbook on marriage. It's hard to kind of read straight through, but you go to it and you're like, oh, yeah, this, small letters, a lot of words. So it's more like a reference guide, but he also has a few exercises in there for people to go through. But Married and How to Stay That Way by Steve Carr, we normally have this in our bookstore pretty readily. Most of these on and off we do. So Married and How to Stay That Way, my favorite, Noreen's favorite. It's great. Very practical. Being Calvary Chapel, we kind of read differently than other people, so the outside of Calvary Chapel people, you got to kind of, they put a lot of psychology into it, so just, I stomach it because God's truth is before any other truth, and so if someone uses psychology and they're pointing out a biblical principle, I'm fine with it. God already knows, So I just don't like to give I don't like to give a secular psychologist credit for God's truth, right? I have a problem with that. So Calvary guys tend to give it, try to give it all to God and stay very, very scriptural. So Married and How to Stay That Way, best one. And then parenting, right? Obviously that's a big deal in families. Best book on parenting is very simple, very easy to read, is Parenting Without Regret. And so I know Steve Carr personally. Awesome guy, right? I can vouch for him. When they write a book, it's good to know that they're good people and their marriage is really good and everything. I know Jimmy and Laura Seibert as well. They were my daughter's pastors in Waco, and out of his church, they've planted probably close to 100 churches now, and they send out missionaries all over the world. He's super busy, but he will return my texts. And I'll say, hey, I'll be up in Waco. Can we have a cup of coffee? And he'll have a cup of coffee with me. His church is 5,000 people, and he doesn't care if anybody knows his name. He's my age, and he's still trying to get on the mission field. I'm like, brother, I love you. He's a very simple guy. But the better thing about this book is, so we know him, we know his wife, we know 2 of his 4 children. And one of his children discipled Cambrielle, my daughter, okay? And was her roommate for 2 or 3 years in college. So we knew her very well. And then I knew his son. His son spent a year in Greece as a missionary on the same team that my other daughter was on. So I got to know him. I'd run into him all the time up at school. He's my daughter's age, and so we'd see him all the time, and I'd have good conversations with him. But then when we were in Greece, I got to spend a lot of extended amount of time. And they write in here how they responded to their parents' upbringing. And all 4 of the kids absolutely love the Lord as adults now. And what my wife and I loved about this is it's very purposeful. It is, and very practical, and very biblical. And it is how my wife and I raised our children, but they were way more organized and purposeful about it, And it's awesome in that sense. Because the world right now is like nuts, right? Like it is nuts on raising kids. And just, there's nothing good, like nothing good about it, right? This is very practical and gives a lot of insight. And so you may be recommending this. If you have kids, you may, read it yourself. But it's one that I absolutely recommend to parents. We've used this in our church for Bible studies as well. We had a young mom take young mothers through this as a Bible study. So those are my favorite books on marriage and family to this point. All right. Yes?
What was the title of the Wahey book?
The Act of Marriage. And I need to go online and buy a bunch of used ones, because I tend to give them away. So is great, Most of the time people don't write in them. My used books are not very good. I thrash them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about practical counseling. Counseling happens all the time without you knowing it, and or without you setting it up, right? And in a very practical sense, that is the best counseling. Organic is what I call it. God ordained, or I don't know. When you sit down and you're at a meal with someone and then you end up talking about marriage, that is awesome, right? And so it's good to know, because you're going to be in situations, and again, everybody who's married can testify. It can be wonderful, but it's also the hardest thing you'll ever do in life, because you're doing it your whole life, right? Once you enter and you're doing it, and it's rough and it's hard and everything else. So these conversations that people have are very important. Hey, let's go out to a meal. Hey, why don't we get together and go, and that's a great way to counsel. Or let's go get a cup of coffee. That's a great way to counsel, right? And then there's times that, let's get together and, I got some awesome stuff I want to give you guys. And then it becomes more official, right? But I would say I do way more counseling casually. In the hallway after church, right? You see me, you want to say hi, but I try to stay focused on the person in front of me. I'm counseling half the time, right? It's just, but it's informal, organic. Hey, I got to talk to the pastor after church. I didn't say I set up a counseling appointment. And then often it's like, hey, can I talk to you further? And I go, I always tell people, you got to talk to my daughter. It's not that I want to be formal and weird. It's just she'll make sure I'm there, because literally I won't show up unless someone is telling me, right? So people tell me that you have a meeting this afternoon. Make sure you get there, right? Whatever. So then it becomes formal, and that's fine as well if you're in that role. Obviously, premarital is that way. Hey, let's go through this stuff together. I just want to help you out and stuff. So that's the practical counseling. But the best is the least sanitized is better, because people are more relaxed, less defensive. What's going to happen here? What do you? And especially when they. I feel like I'm pretty relaxed. My wife just tells me, no, you're not as relaxed as you think you are. But people come into my office and they feel like they're in the principal's office, right? Like, I'm in trouble, so you take people off guard. Okay, so let's do a little review here. So let's just say you're taking someone through the premarital counseling. They're not married yet, okay? They sit down, and you want them to talk. You want to find out where they're at. What do you do?
Pray first.
Well, you pray first. Good deal.
Tell me about your relationship.
Well, let's just say you've been counseling with them, right? You've already had the first one at least, right? So they come in. You know them a little bit. Yeah, or just to start, this is what I always do. How you doing? Anything happened this week? And just let them pour out. And what you're doing at that point is, and I'll talk a little bit more about being able to read people, but you're trying to figure out if you have some material to work on, right? What happens when you go to the doctor and there's nothing wrong? So why are we here? I'm good. I don't know. It's good to go to the doctor, so I'm here. Right? They have nothing to work on. It's like, well, why are you here? Right? Yeah, so ask them how they're doing. So my view on this is, if they are doing their homework, they're getting the information you want them to learn, at least into their marriage, right? If they've done their homework, that's good. So now all of a sudden, they have a certain fight that they're involved in. You want them to be able to deal with that fight, even though so you might be talking about in-laws, but they had a fight about something else. Like in-laws is number 5. It's lesson 5, actually 6, because the intake's 1. Right? And so the lesson might be in-laws, but their in-laws aren't necessarily going to be that much of an issue. Some people they are, some people they aren't. Right? And so you can spend the whole hour to 2 hours with them going back to the communication. You see what I'm saying? It's not this rigid thing where, whoa, we got to finish this. Okay? You want to say, how are you doing? Where are you at? What's going on? So you let them talk, and you're discerning if it's all good. Because the guy will be talking and the woman will go, guys aren't necessarily perceptive about the details, right? And women are going to be able to share and are normally better verbally than a guy in describing relationship type feelings, right? So I'll let the guy talk, and and then I ask, so from your perspective, how did it go? Well, I'll tell you. Then you get all this information, right? And as guys, we don't like failure. So even if it was really bad, we normally really try to put the best light on it. And it's our nature. It doesn't mean we're horrible people. It doesn't mean we're liars. It's just our nature. I do that as well. Most guys do that. I'm not going to say all guys do that, but most guys just, they kind of put the better light on it, right? And it's just, it is what it is. So that's normally what I do up first, because the thing is, you can still get through all the material. But you want to focus on those things that might be a problem for the future. Or they're a problem now and you're going, ooh, okay.
Why do you suppose guys do that? Females. Is it because we're petty?
No, it's not that you're petty. A couple of things, though, is women's emotions are way more developed than guys, right? And women embrace their emotions. Men avoid our emotions. We really try not to cry. And women are like, "Oh, I need to cry. I need a cry movie." And guys are like, why would you pay money to go cry? That's torture for us, right? And I don't know why it is, but it is the way God created us. But he did create us to be able to go to war, right? He did create us for certain things for protection, right? And to go, if the family's starving, we will kill the house pet more likely than the woman would. Women might do that, but and have had to do that. But the man can set aside his emotions. We're better at it, right? Of that part, but we're just not as good even deciphering. And relationally, women are normally better. They focus on their relationships. And I think I shared this before, but when you talk to a man on an airplane, you find out what he does. You talk to a woman on the airplane, and you find out her relationships, and you have no idea that she's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Because she's talking about her relationships. Women value relationships. When we moved to Corpus Christi, I was so worried about getting a job. My wife was worried about leaving all of her relationships behind. A guy talks to a friend once a year and they're tight. That's not how women have relationships, right? So it's just different. And for whatever purposes, God made us differently in that way, and I think there's a lot of good reasons, and I think we discover more and more reasons. But that's why in our first study, I talked about embracing the differences instead of hating them. Right? My wife thinks about so many more things than I do. It's the way she is. I don't hate her for it. I used to think she was crazy. I don't think she's crazy. She's my wife. The details. She rescues me half the time because I'm not thinking about those types of things, I'm a one-topic wonder. I'm just thinking about what's on my mind, right? I get obsessive, so about one thing. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons for that. So a lot of times you get that. And it is interesting because sometimes when the woman is more hurt and she's saying things, sometimes she goes too far and she's exaggerating, or it's only her perspective and she passionately is saying it and she's crying. And then what happens, you get back to the guy and the guy goes, well, let me give you some other background. And he starts laying out some facts that actually clear up the overreaction on her side in that instance. So it is confusing. I'll talk about how to help with that. But in premarital, they're still in love, so I'm just saying it's not that complex. We're talking 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, it gets really complex, right? Because there's a lot there. But when they're in premarital, you want to figure out where are the places where they're going to have problem as they're growing in their marriage, right? And then focus on that a little bit more than if their in-laws are great. So Cambrell, or McKenna and her husband. They're Christians. He's a lay assistant pastor in a little Baptist church. This is my son-in-law's dad. We're great friends. We go out to dinner with them when they're not around. They don't have in-law problems. We live in the same town. There's not, my in-law, my son-in-law's mom, celebrated her birthday at our house. So it's like, we're not going to focus on that and make a huge deal out of that and spend all this time. And if issues come up, we can deal with them, right? But, I want to find out where the problem's going to be. And I knew with my daughter is very intense and she's very detailed. So I know that she can drive herself to a place of dissatisfaction by figuring out everything that's wrong instead of being blessed in everything that's right. So I was on the phone with her the other day and she was frustrated about something, and I kind of start reminding her how good she has it because she has an incredible marriage, and then she's like, oh yeah, so, but this is a way just to figure out where you need to focus more, right, and make sure they're doing fine. So I always ask them that, and that might immediately lead into your whole time together. It's okay to do that, okay? And you pouring out your wisdom, bringing up scriptures and everything else, right? So that's what I normally do. When it's someone that is married and I normally know the issue before they came in, a little bit of the background, and I'll say, this is my statement. So why are we here? You might have a different way to do it. So why are we here? And I just want to hear the fullness of why they're there, right? And then afterwards, after I meet once and I get the whole story about what's going on, at least from both sides, then I ask them, so the next question is, so how was this week? How did you guys do this week? Now, even in those, I give them homework. So the basic homework that we already talked about, if it's premarital, how have you guys been doing? Have you been pure? Right? We talked about that. The importance of purity, especially during premarital counseling and leading to the point of honeymoon night, you know. The second one is, have you been praying together? Remember how important that is. That's the single most important thing in marriage is regular prayer together as a couple. I realized on my way here this morning, my wife and I have had a guest in our home and we haven't prayed together in a focused way at all for a few days. And I woke up my wife and I said, we need to pray. And we prayed. Just got to do it. So important. Doesn't matter how good you think your marriage is, pray together, right? So I always ask, you pray. I did a premarital last night. This is fresh on my heart, you know. Are you praying together? And I tell them at least 4 times a week, you guys need to pray together. You need to develop that habit, okay? So purity, prayer. Did they do their assigned homework? Last night I go, so did you guys do, oh, we didn't have access to a printer, so we didn't do it. And I'm looking at them, I'm going, so what are we going to talk about? And I knew I had a lot to talk about, but my point is, I'm not going to work on this harder than you are. Right? You want people, and so it says a lot if people are not even attempting to do what you asked them to do. Right? And so I normally make it pretty simple. Did you pray? That's homework. Did you do your handouts if they're in premarital? Or if you gave them something the week before, did you guys go through this together as a couple? You know, that's their homework. Or it might be one of the things I often do is, did you do something special out of the ordinary this week to show your wife that you cherish her? I brought home my paycheck. No, something out of the ordinary, something special. It can even be cheesy, you know. Did you buy her flowers? Did you take her out to dinner where she wanted to go? Did you clean up the whole house before she came home? You know, and do something special that you maybe don't do, you know, and vice versa. Have you done something this week to show your husband that you respect him and his role in your life? Right? So that's very common because people don't do it. And I try to be in the habit, even after 30 years of marriage, to do something special for my wife to show her that I cherish her. Last night, I was in a little bit of trouble. Right? Because I had this premarital, it went long, so it was from 6 to 8. And then my daughter had a group of girls doing an overnighter from the young adult group, and I walked out there to see how they were doing. They had a little fire pit out in the field. And they're out there doing worship, so I hung out and did worship with them for a while, you know, and talked and chatted until about 9. And then I got in my car. I didn't have my phone with me, and it's like, I'm out picking up my own dinner. It's like, so I know I have to do something special for my wife soon because I blew it. It's my bad, you know. We're not in a fight or anything, but I just know I blew it, you know. I didn't consider her. I can have all kinds of excuses, but I still let her down, you know. So, anyways, so how was week? Did you do your homework? And then I always leave this: any questions? So even if they haven't been real honest, I always tell people, if you have something that comes up, and you need, mark it, write it down if you have to, and bring it to me, right? And so they'll say, okay, so this happened, and how would you handle this, right? And they're normally looking at each other because they're saying, well, this is the right way to do it. No, this is the right way to do it, so what is pastor going to do, And I normally don't give them the answer that either of them gave, we're saying was the right answer, but I want people to be willing to ask questions, how do you help? Remember, one of the points was do not suffer in silence. Because literally 95% of the issues that destroy marriages are issues that healthy marriages deal with and succeed at it, right? And there's a few things outside that make it very tricky, but even those things, you're not so good at sinning that you uniquely sin like other couples haven't sinned, right? Every couple. And there's some great marriages in this church that have gone through affairs. They've gone through even homosexual contact type affairs and all kinds, like craziness in this church where people have awesome marriages. And you would have no idea that they had a struggle, right? I mean, God does that. That's what God does. He heals, right? So don't allow people to suffer in silence. So encourage them to ask questions, right? So if they didn't reveal it like, how you doing, they're going to reveal it in, you guys got any questions? And they may bring it up then, right? So I had my notes. If they do their homework, now you can deal with tangents. So that's freeing to know that they at least have that material in them. So especially with premarital, do your homework, right? Okay, so next I want to talk about the role of the Holy Spirit in counseling. And this is any counseling, but it's very important in marriage counseling because you have two people. You have a male and a female. And just by development in the womb until that point, life experience and everything else, they are radically different people. So you get this story and you get this story. What? Those are completely different, right? So, one, how do you deal with it? Well, you know the Bible, you know biblical principles and everything else. And so if you have no idea, you just go straight up the gut with biblical principles on how marriage should be, right? You want to always go, okay, I'm not on your side, I'm not on your side, I'm on God's side. So let's talk about what it should look like, and maybe that will help you guys look at what maybe you did wrong in the process. A good question when you do this, when you go into marriage counseling or premarital counseling, I want to do it. My wife wants to do it. Healthy marriages want to do it. Every marriage wants to blame the problem in the marriage on the other person. When did that start? Garden. First marriage, right? First marriage. It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. It's God, it's the woman that you gave me. So God's the problem and the woman's the problem. I'm not the problem, says Adam, right? So a good question to ask, because this is the goal, for each person to give of themselves. Not try to fix the other person so that the marriage is better, for them to fix themselves so the marriage is better. What do I add to the marriage? Me. So if I'm better, the marriage is better. If she would just, no, fix me. So a question I often ask people as I give them their roles, and hopefully you look through that roles, responsibility in marriage this week, but as you look at their roles, so let me ask you, how could you have done this better? It's not asking what did they do wrong, it's asking them what could they have done better. But they, no, not they, I'm not talking about they, I'm talking about you. How could you have responded better? That's a good question, right? All of a sudden it puts it smack dab where it can actually do some good. Because if you let it go, sometimes, I want to hear people talk, but I don't want to just keep on going down the same road. Let's get to the solution. Let's get to the source of the problem and bring a solution to it. And the solution is responding better and differently to the situation. Responding more godly to the situation. Following a biblical principle instead of your fleshly wants, right? So remember this question. How could you have done it better, or how could you have responded differently? That's a good question to ask. Now, it's really good when people get in a tit for tat, and especially premarital, because it doesn't happen as often as marital, right? You're on your best behavior before you get married. You get married, all bets are off, right? And you have a reason to be mad and be belligerent or whatever. So if there has been a tit for tat, premarital, but certainly that more recently in that week, what you're doing is you're focusing on a limited amount of problems. If people have been married for 20 years and now they're talking to you, how many problems can you deal with? Will you ever get to the solution if you're just dealing with the problem? You know, you want to get to the source of the problem and then bring solution. So people are bickering over this, and this, and they've had 10,000 fights in the last 20 years. And you look at the situation and you go, they've had these fights. These fights are a symptom of the problem. Let's identify the problem and then talk about how each person can respond better to the problem. It's not rocket science. Now, if I was being paid to do counseling, I'm just going to listen to the problems all day. Okay, we'll see you next week. That's not my goal. My goal is to bring health to the situation. So I want to identify those basic problems and then have each person bring the solution given the biblical principles that you're teaching them. Right? We're done. We can go home now. You know, that's all counseling is ultimately. Identifying that core problem, bringing biblical principles, and teaching people how to respond biblically in the situation. Right? So, here's the thing, though. Personally, and I'm not going to get in an argument, but I believe that all the gifts are for today, the spiritual gifts. So I'm, you know, like some people think I'm a crazy Pentecostal. I'm not, because I have a very different view about the gifts of the Spirit. I think they're awesome. I think we need them. I think they're incredibly a huge blessing from God. But I think the gifts of the Spirit are given to us to love God and to love others. Period. Okay? And on top of that, God gives us training. And what are we supposed to do with the training that we get? Love God with it and love others with it. God gives us experiences in life. And what are we supposed to do with those experiences? Use them as an excuse, or are we supposed to hand them over to God, get healed, He gives them back to us, and now what are we supposed to do with the history that God has allowed each one of us to have? Love God with it and love others with it, right? The talents or the temperament that we were born with. What are we supposed to do with it? Let's just say you're an intense person. Take that intensity, surrender it to God, and use that intensity to love God and to love other people. And the Lord, you know, in this world, the Lord needs mellow people that are purposeful also. So if you have a really mellow temperament and you're a listener, oh, goodness, praise God, you are so useful to God, right? So you take that temperament and you also surrender it to God to love Him and to love others. See what I'm saying? So everything that we are is to love God and to love others. And God gives us spiritual gifts not so that we can show off and be special. God gives us spiritual gifts so we can be a tool in His hand to minister to the target. When spiritual gifts happen through your life, you're not the target. He's going through you to minister to someone else. And so if God has blessed you to be able to sit across from somebody at a dinner who's really struggling in their marriage, and God wants to minister into their life, you know what you are? You're just a tool to glorify God. And so this is the way I say it. It's like, whether you call it baptism of the Holy Spirit, whether you call them spiritual gifts or not, my whole view of this is, here I am, God, use me, like Isaiah. Surrender. Just use me in whatever way possible. Okay? Just go for it. Just use me. And I, if you've ever heard me teach on the way the Spirit works, I just tell people, I'm a hose. What is a hose without water? It's nothing, right? It's just a thing. It's just, but unless you put water through it, It's nothing, but it's also what? Incredibly important as a specific delivery system, right? But you don't go to Home Depot to see their hose display. Now, my wife gets excited, this time of year. Oh, let's go to Home Depot, check out what they got for their flowers, right? She loves to plant flowers. And she gets excited about flowers. People advertise, new flowers are in, pansies are in. Pansies didn't die during the freeze. Isn't that crazy? Our pansies are alive. The only thing in our house or on our property that's alive is the pansies. But anyway, so she gets excited about that. Do you guys get excited about hoses? Right? But our hose is important. They are a delivery system for the life-giving water. And this is what I do. For me, I'm a delivery system for life-giving water. And so God tends to use me in different ways than everybody else. But I think that's what he wants to use you for in general. He wants to deliver a message through you or information through you or compassion or love or prayer or whatever it might be through you to a person. And it's very specific because that's what hoses do, right? You're watering over here. Now you're watering over there. It's not a sprinkler. You're not just throwing it out there. He specifically puts you in a place and you're the delivery system or you're the container to bring the life to the people. Sunday mornings, this is what I feel like. Now, I'll give you a little insight into my Sunday morning teachings. I do prepare, and I spend hours upon hours. I'm not done with mine because we've had a guest in our house, but it's for tomorrow morning's message. I'm excited about it. We're talking about a demon-possessed man getting healed, okay? And it's a very interesting passage, and I like it. I'm excited to give it, but I'm going to study. But the funniest thing is, I study, I prepare, but I do trust that the sermon's going to be better than my notes. Because I only have the capacity so much to give the heart of God. But I know when I'm speaking, it's not about me. It's about people in this room that need to hear the message. So I do expect, I'm not presumptuous, but I do know that God loves people in this room. And it's not about me giving a great sermon. It's about God using me to minister to a person, right? So I'm not the special one in the room, even though everybody's listening to me at that moment. God has specific targets on people's head that morning that need to hear something. And if it's not in my notes, he's going to make sure that my ADD brain grabs it somehow, some way, and gives it to that person. And I expect it. It happens all the time. And so when you're counseling, you're not the special one in the room. God has a target on that marriage. He has a bullseye on that marriage, and he wants to bless that marriage, and you're the delivery system. Okay? That's my whole view on spiritual gifts, right? If I was already good at preaching, why would I get a gift of teaching? It would just be a talent. God could use it. But if I'm a loser at it and he wants me to be a preacher, he better give me a gift. So it doesn't mean I'm special because I have the gift of teaching. It means I'm special needs. God had to give it to me so I could be good at it, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm such a wonderful teacher because God gifted me. It's like, man, I wasn't very good at it and God gifted me. Therefore, I'm able to do what he wants me to do. But naturally, this ADD brain can't sit down very long and study, but God gives me that ability. That's very supernatural. It's very humbling as opposed to prideful. See what I'm saying? But what do we do in the church? Oh, they're so gifted, and we put them on a pedestal. No, if they're so gifted and doing wonderful things, glorify God. Because they weren't good at something and God made them good at it. Who gets the credit for it? So counseling, I love to depend on counseling. So again, back to the spiritual gifts. Quite simply, most gifts fall under the realm of general prophecy. When we think of prophecy, we get all weird, right? Ooh, prophet, because we're always thinking Old Testament prophet, okay? But in the New Testament, if you are saved and washed in the blood of Jesus, it means that you can now be the temple of the Holy Spirit. God can now dwell in you full time because you've been cleansed. You've been declared righteous in heaven. In the Old Testament, God used prophets and the Holy Spirit would come upon them and they would prophesy. David prayed, "Take not thy Holy Spirit from me." It's not bad theology. It's bad New Testament theology. It's not bad Old Testament theology. Saul prophesied. King Saul was a horrible king. Rejected God, and but he prophesied. So the Holy Spirit can come upon people. In the New Testament, all of us have the same access to the same Holy Spirit, right? And so prophecy by its nature has changed in the New Testament. But Paul talks about prophecy and really elevates prophecy in 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14. And what do I mean by prophecy? God's heart going through a man to other men. A delivery system of a message from God. Does God want to encourage people? So if you're encouraging people, it might be you encouraging them because God has worked on your heart and you're just encouraging them. But many times you're encouraging them and it's kind of out of the blue that you're encouraging them, and I think you're being prophetic at the moment. How? God knows them, they're the target, and he's using you to deliver encouragement to them because they need it. So something as simple as an encouraging word is also prophetic. See what I'm saying? So when I say the church needs to be prophetic, I'm not talking about us being wild, crazy, climb up the wall Pentecostal people. I'm talking about us just loving one another with the love of Christ that's in us. And even if you bring a verse to somebody because the Lord laid it upon your heart to give somebody a verse, what are you doing? You are a delivery system of living water to them. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not like, prophecy has to be. So prophecy is also, it's basically two different things. It's foretelling. That's the weird one, right? It's telling something of the future. But I think much more as we look at the spiritual gifts, prophecy just needs to be forthtelling, telling God's heart currently to the person that's in front of you. And I think all of us, especially in counseling, people need us to speak into their lives the truth of God. Technically, what is that? It's prophecy, right? So even if you break it down, there's a gift called word of wisdom. What is a word of wisdom? Technically, a word of wisdom is having an answer that you don't necessarily know yourself. God, you're dealing with a situation. And one of the most wonderful things about counseling is you get to watch the Holy Spirit work up close and personal through you because you have said, I want to be a delivery system for the wisdom of God into people's lives. God loves their marriage. He wants them to be married. He hates divorce. You're there to help them not only survive, but thrive. Good marriages glorify God. It's the greatest witness America can have right now is a bunch of really good marriages. Above anything else is great marriages, right? I mean, that's the first thing that he put into this world. Man, woman, and then marriage. The world's trying to redefine male and female and destroy marriage and say it's nothing. Redefine it and everything else, right? So these are so important. So God wants to use you. So you're in a situation and you have no idea. You'd be surprised how many times I'm sitting there listening to people and go, Lord, I'm clueless. I have a smile on my face. I'm writing down some notes. But I'm like, I have no idea. Yeah, you pastor, Dr. Pastor Rod, Carver, and yeah. The thing is, I realize if it's coming from my flesh, it's not the best. I want it to be a scripture from God or a principle from God every time. So I'm always asking myself, God, will you? And God will lay upon my heart a solution. That's called a word of wisdom, technically. And if it's from God to man, technically it's also a prophecy. And this is awesome. I love it when it happens. It's like, wow, where'd that come from? I was clueless, and I'll be 5 or 10 minutes. I'll just be kind of what am I going to say? And I'll just let them talk, trying to figure it out. And the Lord, eventually answers my prayer and lays a great answer on my heart, Sometimes it's unique. Sometimes I'm remembering an old. But I just trust that God's going to do it because the target's in front of me. I'm just a willing vessel. If I get in the way and think that I know so much, God's going to go, okay, go ahead and try it and see what happens. I just want to be that willing vessel. So I always pick this up and don't drink it. I'm going to drink it now. So that's a word of wisdom. Do you need that in counseling? Absolutely, right? Pray for the Spirit to be involved in your counseling. Number two, one of the other most recognized thing that the Lord does with me in counseling, and I think every counselor should pray for it, is a word of knowledge. So a word of wisdom is a solution to a situation that you naturally would not know. Okay? That's a word of wisdom. Wisdom is the application of knowledge. Okay? A word of knowledge is God giving you information that you have no access to outside of him. Why is that important in counseling? You're sitting there with a couple, they're really struggling, and you're going, I don't know why they're struggling. Something else is here, something else. And God starts to lay it upon your heart, there's something else here. So you might say, I don't think you guys are letting me in on everything that's going on. Is something else going on? Or you might say, let me just ask this question. Is pornography involved in your marriage? And you kind of phrase it to where you're not accusing them, but you just ask them, is this an issue? Because if it is, we need to deal with it. You see what I'm saying? Or do you guys drink often? And I don't drink at all. But I know people are allowed to drink, Jesus drank wine, whatever. But when people are going through a problem in their marriage and they're drinking, that's the worst thing they can do. And many times when you really dig in, one of them's drinking a lot and the other person is bitter towards that person, right? So God lays this upon your heart. And there's been so many times, and it's crazy because the Holy Spirit busts them, not you, right? But if people are drinking, what happens when you drink is you lower your inhibitions. So then those sinful things that are on your heart and all your ugliness will come straight out your mouth without any keeping your thoughts captive, without any restrainer on your lips, and it is so destructive, right? So maybe the Lord lays that upon your heart, and you go, okay, while we're counseling, listen up, guys. I can talk about, you can drink wine, but being drunk is a sin in the Scriptures, right? But I'm telling you, man, right now where you guys are at, the last thing you should do is have a glass of wine, together. 2 glasses of wine, you guys are done. You're full on. You've taken down enough barriers. So things like that. But these are words of wisdom. This is where you get to the bottom of the thing. Or has there been an affair? Like, is there a reason there's not a whole lot of trust going on here? And so you think about it logically, and we're intelligent and stuff like that. But I really think the Lord wants us to think about it, be focused, and everything else. At the same time, if you're open, He is going to lay things on your heart. Not to make you look smart, to help the people. And I tell people all the time, I'm not here to hide your sin. I'm not here to coddle you. I'm not here to win your fight for you. I'm here to help your marriage, right? And so the Holy Spirit, I'm just saying, that word of wisdom, the word of knowledge, and I tell you what, the word of encouragement, right? The greatest tools in counseling. I don't think I have the gift of prophecy. I think as a tool in God's hands, I prophesy all the time. There's people I know that'll have dreams and stuff like that, and I love that, and I'll ask, hey, pray for me and see if God gives you something, right? Those are the people that are kind of the prophets in the church. But I think everybody in the church who is open, wanting to be used by God, to love Him and to love other people, can be prophetic. See what I'm saying? Like, just say, God, whatever it takes, Pastor Rod's kind of weird, baptism of the Spirit, whatever. I just want to be used by you. I just want to be a good host. Pray that prayer. And God's not going to hold back. Why? Because He's using you to hit the target. He's using you, and He's going to put you over here in this flower bed, their marriage, and you're going to give life-giving water to them, right? So it's so important to be open to the Holy Spirit in your counseling. All right. All my preliminary stuff is done. We've gone an hour. Why don't we go ahead and take about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If you need to get a cup of coffee, stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, and we'll come back and get into the curriculum. So at this point, are there any questions about what we spoke about to this point? All right.
Absorption mode.
Huh?
We're in absorption
If you go to Israel, you'll have to be in absorption mode, because in Israel, you learn too much, and it's like a flood hose, and it's just like, oh. Anyways, all right. So let's go ahead and look at our curriculum. We did go over how to resolve conflict in a biblical way last time. Did we not, or no? I do not remember. Did we go through lesson 2? We did. Okay, good. Because lesson 3 is like it, but different. It's talking more about communication. And I think I told you, as we look at these things, I encourage those that come to me to also not look at them all in a negative way, because they're all stated negatively. What is the positive side? So you don't want to go through marriage not doing bad things, because that only takes your marriage so far. You want to go through marriage doing good things. So it's not just avoiding the bad, it's actually doing the good. And even in a Christian walk, it's very much the same, right? It's if you're busy doing the things that the Lord tells you to do and wants you to do and encourages you to do and lifts up and says these are good things, you don't have time to do the bad things, right? Because there's so many good things to do. So it is phrased negatively. That's one thing that I have about this. This is an older version. I don't know if he's revised this. If I talk to Steve, I'm going to let him know. Maybe you might want to make those positive, or give a few positive in there so it's not so negative. Did you guys find that as you went through this section, this homework? So it's phrased negatively. Okay. Now again, this is to teach you. It's not for us to go through every single one of these. But now you're in your 3rd session, so you've probably met with the couple if you're doing it in the traditional way. This is actually your 4th session, but it's your 3rd lesson, right? Because the intake could be a whole time. So basically we have 7 lessons, but normally you meet with them 8 times. Sometimes 9, because if you're doing the wedding, you have to spend time preparing for the ceremony and planning that as well. So part 3 is identifying communication roadblocks, right? Things that stop communication. And if you're married, you've done it. You're talking, everything's fine, a statement's made, you're like, right? You're done. You're just not going to talk anymore. It's like, no. And you don't want that to happen. Right? Now, as you have known the couple, as this is probably the 4th time you've gotten together, or if you already know them, what you do is not, you might read every scripture, that may be your style or whatever. For me, I go through them and say, I kind of try to read them, do you have an issue with this? Or again, they're rating themselves on this one. So do you guys see any on here that you think might be an issue for you? That's when you slow down and you look at the scriptures with them and you talk about practical ways to do it differently. See what I'm saying? So it's not always just sticking to the script, but also in this is where you're using your wisdom and the things that the Lord has given you about the couple already to warn them about things that they may not be seeing themselves. Okay? So do you have an arrogant or superior attitude when you speak to your fiancé, right? And then the opposite is, do you have a humble attitude when you speak to your spouse? Or how do you guys like hanging out with arrogant people? No one, right? But the people you like to hang out with, there's a general acceptance and there's a peace about them. And normally that set of pleasurable people to be around includes a certain level of humility. It also applies to you as a person in your marriage. Does your tone reveal a bitter and resentful attitude? So again, you're asking them where the problems might be. Very often in a premarital, people go, no, right? Don't do that. But it is proven how you say something is way more important than what you say. How you say it. And so this is one a lot of times, personally, I stop on. And I also let the couple know that, down the road, after the honeymoon phase, you're going to have to talk to each other about how to communicate better to one another. Because the way that my wife talks to a woman, she can't talk to me because I'm a man and I receive it differently. So my wife may have the greatest intent of coming off well in her own way, but I hear a snappy answer and disrespect in her tone. Another thing is, over on the other side, it talks, or somewhere else down the road, it talks about, are you willing to, or maybe this was last time, are you willing to talk about how to change? So this is where you've gone through this, you're kind of living it a little bit more, and in things like that, you tell people, communication is the intent of the speaker and how the receiver hears it. It breaks down if you don't say it the way you intended, and the person doesn't receive it the way you intended, and they're reading more into it. Now communication has broken down. And this is where you actually need to talk about how to communicate. So my wife will say something to me, and I don't want to assume she's being disrespectful. Heaven forbid. And I'll say things like this, a common thing. Not as common anymore, but for a few years it was very common because we were really trying to work on our communication. And she says something, and I'll say, honey, I know what you're trying to say, but it would be better if you said it this way to me, because that's how I receive it. Well, that's dumb. No, she can't say that because she's not me. She's not allowed to say that. If I say, I know what you're saying, but if you said it this way, it would be better. But here's the catch. If she says it that way and I still respond wrong, now it's on me. I'm putting myself under that bind as well. But that willingness to share with each other, okay, so you have a fight, you sit down, you're trying to reconcile the fight, and you say, well, I got frustrated because you said this. And they're looking at you, but I didn't intend that. I go, maybe you didn't, and you probably didn't. But I'd had a tough day, this had happened, and when you said it, it sounded like you said it in a snappy way. So I'm sorry for receiving it wrongly. But you're also saying next time you're giving them a key on how not to get that response out of you as well. So that's where communication's taking place. So it's not just, does your tone of voice reveal a bitter and resentful attitude? Is your tone of voice in such a tone that the other person will receive it readily? Right? That's more kind of the question. And so sometimes they're so negative, you're like, that's bad or whatever, But so anyway, so I'll stop on a few of these, especially reading the couple. But I do know in marriages over the years that certain things are pretty common, that tone. Men aren't the most discerning beings. We're focused on one thing at a time and compartmentalized, and women are a lot more sensitive to that discernment. But man, when we feel disrespected, we hear it. That's one thing we hear when we feel like someone's disrespecting us. Man, our radar goes up quickly, right? And so instead of you women, or I always tell people, instead of you women thinking all men are bad, I always look as a pastor, I always look at the, and he's so sensitive about this, and I look at her, I go, if you talk to me that way as a pastor, knowing better, having been married 30 years, teaching marriage classes, working on a marriage book, getting a certification in marriage and family counseling, I would still respond the same way because I'm a guy. And then they're like, oh, maybe I should take it seriously, right? Because we can kind of cop this attitude, oh, you're overly sensitive. My wife and I noticed something because we laugh at each other a lot, we tease each other a lot, I've had to back down on that because I've realized sometimes I hurt. And I would rather not be as funny and not hurt. I'd rather be kind and not hurt people. And it's still hard, and I still tease a lot and everything else, and I still am hurting people, but I do it a lot less now, and I'm learning to do it better. But it's funny because about 2 years ago, this app called Marco Polo came out. And what you do in this app is you give video text to people. I love my family in California. I'm really close to my family. And I have a sister in Canada that I'm really close to, but she doesn't use it as much. But my brother and my sister, and then my sister-in-law, and my wife and myself were on this thing. And literally every day we're on Marco Polo. I'm really close to my family in California. But what we noticed is my sister and my sister-in-law are extremely affirming. And what I noticed is I'm sarcastic, and my tone, and my wife mentioned that. She goes, they always say everything so nice. And then when we were planning an event as a family last summer, some of my nieces were on there as well. So there was we had this separate group, and they were planning this, and I would look at it every so often. And my wife said to me, they're so nice and kind and affirming to one another, even when they don't agree. And we were kind of laughing, and then we kind of caught ourselves, and we're looking at each other, and we're going, that's a good thing. That's actually really good. And so, man, I got to check myself before I wreck myself when I get on there because they are so affirming, And so it's like I'm the pastor out of that group. I should know better. I should be better at it. And they're like fully teaching me lessons, But, man, it's better to be kind than funny. See what I'm saying? And this is just important. So these are the attitudes. And so as you go through that, did you guys notice any that perhaps you need to catch yourself on? Anybody? No volunteers?
Mine is my tone.
Your tone?
A lot of it as a male too is trying to control an argument instead of looking, we are equals, we both have equal say, and as a male, I think you tend to raise that voice up like, no, you'll listen. We don't control the marriage. We work together.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I do talk to young couples about too, is if the man represents God's strength, but also less emotional, less in touch with our emotions, less deep emotions, less tied to our emotions, right? That is one of our strengths. So that ability to control, like for men, I always tell men, I set a rule in my life. As soon as I yell and raise my voice, I've lost the argument. I'm done. I've sinned. I am not allowed to do that. I don't tell my wife that. She has to figure out what her standards are. But for me, because when my wife yells at me, it bugs me. I'm disrespected, whatever. When I yell at my wife, everything is blown up. Or if I yell in the house, I have a wife and 2 daughters. It just blows everything up. I'm supposed to represent the strength of God in that home. And when strength gets angry and sinful, it is ugly. It's not, men go, well, that's not fair. She yells at me. I'm like, what? Are you a man or are you a woman? Right? Like, man, you need to you need to recognize you have really good things that you can bring to this marriage. And if you abuse them, you're not bringing the best to your marriage. That strength and that ability to detach from your emotions makes us weird to women, right? But it's also a very good thing, And so that tone, that ability to lose it. So what I like to do is to control the argument's level. So I recognize I want my wife to be passionate, lovely, open, this bursting bouquet of flowers. I want my wife to be that. I don't want to, for me though, what I'm going to do is my side of it, I'm going to control. I'm going to control me. And what happens then is if my wife is real frustrated and may even be raising her voice, if she sees me not raising my voice, she realizes I don't have to raise mine. And I am controlling it, but I'm not dominating it, right? I'm bringing what I can do. And listen, the opposite is also true. When I'm really frustrated and my wife comes in loving and calm and respectful, she calms me down so quickly instead of blowing each other up. When we bring the worst of our blessings into the fight, we blow it up. Right, what is a fight? It's like the old atomic bomb tests, right? Boom, and it just keeps on spreading, and the radiation just keeps on. How do you contain that? Right. So my part of it is I'm just not going to add to it. Right. I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna be controlled. I'll state my case in as loving way as I possibly can, and that brings down. Men and women both have the ability to do that. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. What does it talk about? It talks about the godly conduct of the woman winning over the husband. So when my wife responds that way, I'm done. She's got me, I have to back off and back down, Let me see. Okay, one big one. You guys would highlight this because you'd probably talk about this every time. Do you exaggerate by using the phrases as you always or you never? No, 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 no. So something I found, and you can argue against me or whatever, but this is one of my axioms or one of my kind of statements, is the way men are made. Again, it's a general statement. Most men, I would say, or many men, would rather not try and fail rather than try and fail. Do you guys understand that? Most men are so sensitive to failure because of this hero complex that we all have. We want to be the hero. God placed that in us to be used for good motivation, not for bad. So we want to succeed. We want to fix everything. We want to be the hero. We want to be a superhero as a little boy. Every little boy wants to be a fireman or a policeman or an army man, or they play army. They want to conquer. They want to win. They want to solve the problems, right? So what happens when a man is doing his best and the wife says, "You never and you always"? He says, if I've been putting all this effort into it and I'm still failing, why even try at all? See what I'm saying? How damaging those words are? And I'm talking as a man. And I don't know if I've given this illustration yet. I'm going to give it again. My wife and I moved from a relatively new house over here to a house over by the bay, and we love the water, and so we're in the small houses behind the big houses on Ocean Drive. But our house is 70 years old. It's a lot of work. Never realized how much work that house is. I'm not a handyman. I'm not good at it. I YouTube things, I try to do it, and then I have to get people to help me, right? That's my typical process on everything that I do. So one thing I enjoy doing, I used to do it, when I was a janitor, I used to mow a lawn at a church on the weekends that my mom ran their preschool, and so from junior high all the way through high school. So I can mow a lawn, I can edge a lawn. I'm good at cutting lawns, right? So sometimes I get busy, and then we had the drought, and then weeds grew instead of our grass, and then I was recovering that. It's getting better. And so at one point in time, I go out in the backyard, and I bring out my saw, I bring out my clippers, I mow the lawn, I fertilize the lawn, I edge, I weed eat. And our kitchen window looks out onto our backyard. I took our blower, I blew off the whole patio and driveway and everything. I straightened out the patio furniture. And man, it's looking good. I'm looking out there, I'm going, man, 3 hours. Summertime, I'm hot. Now, at that point, we had 2 other dogs, not the dogs we have now, but we also had a dog next door, and they would always chew up the fence between the yards. And so the fence had, double boards on one place here, and, we'd had a storm that picked up our trampoline and threw it against the fence and broke the fence, so it wasn't quite level. And then the dogs were constantly chewing through the old wood and creating holes in the thing that we were just patching up. So it was kind of patchwork, kind of leaning. But I tell you what, the lawn looked awesome. It was awesome. My wife looks out the kitchen window, and I'm waiting for the praise. I'm waiting for the praise. Looks so good out there. Thank you, honey. That's all I wanted. 3 hours worth of work. I'm just getting, what my wife says? She goes, look at that fence. We're white trash. I literally did not mow the lawn for like a month and a half because I'm like, why even try? I copped the attitude. I would rather not try and fail then try and fail. And if you think we're white trash, I'm going to be white trash. Let me get a broken down trailer and throw it back there, and a few old tires or whatever, it's going to be a junkyard back there, because if that's what I am, that's what I am. So when you say I never or you always, okay, if that's how I am, that's how I am. Fine. I'll do everything you hate. Because we normally say that when it's something we don't like, right? And if you say I'm like that, and I've been trying, it's like, and you women have some form of that same reaction, but men are pretty clear and simple, right? We're pretty straightforward in that area. So here's the thing. What very often happens is, the mom's raising the kids, and the husband so let's just say it's a family where the mom's decided to stay home from work, and she's raising the kids. And she's doing devotions with the kids every day. And then the man goes, well, I'd like to read them a story. Oh, come on, you never do that. She's saying, you're a bad dad. Don't even try. Right? And if you guys ever see relationships, oftentimes the men check out. And this is one of those times where you might even send the woman out of the room and go, look. Or the man out of the room and just say to the woman, look. You're telling him he's a failure in all these areas. He's not going to try. And if you encourage him, and lift him up, and he wants to live to your expectations. But if your expectations are impossible, he's just going to quit. Why? Why even try if that's what I am? And so one of the biggest problems is men have checked out of the family life, trying to lead the devotions, but if a woman encourages the man, hey, you're home, let's read a Bible story with the kids. And then saying, I love it when you read. I'm so glad when you get to. We should do this more often, but, I know you're busy and stuff. But what's going to happen? The man's going to be like, he's going to come home from work. Let's do a Bible story. That's how we are. By nature, it's the way God made us, right? The thing is, Satan just wants to thrash. And so he'll give the woman a habit that just totally defeats the husband. And he gives the husband a habit that totally causes a root of bitterness in the woman. And it's just waiting to blow up or fall apart, right? And one of the things that our government did to destroy marriage is it started handing single women money for having babies. Now, still, I think it's the same biologically that you need a man and a woman to have a baby. But very often when a woman has a baby and her desire is to be with those children, the man feels needed. And what does he want to do? Protect and provide, right? But if the government is giving her money to have babies, if she gets married, she stops getting that money. What does the man do? I'm not needed. And he goes off. And what do you have? You have tons of single family households because the men don't feel needed. Right? And listen, my view, and it's not always this way, but I think women work super hard, even if they decide, and even especially if they decide to stay home with the kids more. I think they work super, super, super hard. But it's not but it's self-defeating if they're always telling the man how much harder they work than the man, because the man wants to feel appreciated, right? And the thing is, it is true. He is going out. He is working hard. He is facing the world, and he is trying, and he wants to try harder. And when we were planning this church, I had little kids, and I love my kids, but I worked 3 jobs for many years, 4 years. And for 2 years into like our 12th year of the church, I was still teaching at a school and pastoring the church. But at one time I was running the radio station, pastoring the church, and teaching school. And it's like, and my wife appreciated me for doing that, for being sacrificial. Did my wife work harder? Probably, than me. But I loved it that she appreciated me. And we never got in this tit for tat. We did this together. It was you see what I'm saying? Like that's one area where we were really good, that we didn't fail. But the other area is my wife's perception. She sees everything. She looks in the backyard. She can't help but see the fence. It's the way she is. We got a nicer fence now, by the way, but the hurricane helped with that. But still, just the other day, we were talking about my desires to fix up our house and the reality of me fixing the things in our house. Now, I put all new doors on the closets and all the doors in our house, and I can fix a scratched floor, and I can do I've learned how to do a lot of things, but our house is constantly needing something, right? We need new windows, and just goes on and on. And she said, she was joking because we need Bob and Fab to come help us redo a bathroom that 3 years ago flooded, but it's the one I use, and so we don't care that we got a little bit of cardboard patching over here. Whatever, it's just my bathroom, I don't care. But my wife's like, this is driving me crazy, right? And she goes, so what if we just destroy the bathroom and then have Bob and Fab come help us rebuild it? And I laugh, I go, yeah, we need to get that done. Good thing I'm good at some things and not good at, good thing I'm good at some things, though, honey, right? And she goes, yeah, right? Because the temptation for me is to feel like you're a loser, you can't fix that little bathroom. But we've gotten to the point where she understands I need to be affirmed, even though I am not the fix-it guy. I'm not handy. I'm going to Mexico to build a house, and I had to go into the building over here and practice nailing nails so I don't look so dumb once I get down there, right? I practiced, But it was funny because I just recognized like this little thing, like you always or you're never or you're a failure or whatever. I recognized how my wife has grown so much in that area and is a huge blessing to me, realizing that I need that affirmation. It's what I thrive on it. But the reality is, I can't do it in every area. It's like, honey, good thing I'm good at some things, right? She goes, oh yeah, I thank God for you, honey. And it's like, little boy, you're okay. But she recognizes it, and it's good, and vice versa. When a man says, you never do this or you never do that, man. Isn't it amazing, all the succulents, all the aloe-type plants that we have around the city? And after the freeze, what happened? And that is just the perfect illustration of what happens to the beauty of a woman when a man does not love her, cherish her. It's this beautiful, thriving plant, and then all of a sudden, whew. Now listen, we're all going to fail. And remember, the goal is the foundation of Jesus Christ. And if a man is learning to do that, the woman doesn't always have to be deflated. But I don't care how strong the woman is in the Lord. If a man completely deflates her beauty over a long period of time, who can withstand that? And I don't care how strong a man is in the Lord. If a woman just badgers a man to death and disrespects him continually, she's going to lose that ability to speak into his life, and he's going to give up on the marriage. It's just the way it works, right? And so I'm a pastor. But about once a year, I'll lose it. It used to be monthly, that I would be like, you disrespect me, and maybe she did, maybe she didn't, but my perspective got weak. I stopped holding on to the Lord as my strength. So that's always the foundation, is that spiritual foundation, but that let down. So again, these words, these principles say, I can still speak into your life if you do it right. If people love me and they speak into my life in a way that I can receive it, I have to listen to everybody. And my wife is the same way. And I tell everybody, man, you want to speak in such a way that the person can receive it. And these are all those principles. So you always or you never is one that you bring up a lot, right? The next section there, it says, do you twist your fiance's words to confuse the discussion? People say, well, I never do that. No, we do it all the time, right? We want to win the argument instead of discuss to resolve. And therefore, we get away from the truth and we put all this meaning into their words when they didn't mean it that way. No, the way you said it is this, and this is what you meant, and it just goes on. But we need to be careful of that. People will never put that they actually do that. But in all reality, in the heat of the moment, we want to win the argument, so we twist the argument around and we see it only our way. And the best way to resolve that is to be able to say, okay, let's stop. From my perspective, I'm not saying this is what you did, but from my perspective, this is kind of what I heard in the way that you said it. Well, I didn't say it that way. Okay, that's fine, but I'm saying this is why I reacted the way I reacted because I heard it this way. See how that resolves everything? That's the ability to clear up the issues. This is, when I look at this honestly, okay, I always tell people I was healed of cussing when I gave my heart back over to the Lord. I wasn't healed of cussing. I never cussed, right? So it's like, whatever. So that one isn't me. But some people will run into this. They'll cuss in their arguments, and it's just wrong. Has no place in a Christian's life, much less in a marriage towards someone that you love, right? But so that one sometimes, but when I look at this, I would say most of these I have failed at personally. Not my wife, me. Most of these, in some way or another, I have failed in these. And so when you're looking at people and you're trying to discern what they need to hear, you need to be familiar with this information. That's why I had you guys go through it, to where you're able to say, you know what, this one could be an issue, right? This one, or in my life at least, I've caught myself doing this. Another important one is down there about 2/3 of the way down in that last section. It says, do you neglect to set time aside to communicate with your fiancé? This adds to a lot of problems in marriage, right? You just start living life. Life's busy. It's crazy. You don't slow down to talk. And this is how people grow apart. One of the practical things I encourage people to do is find something that you both enjoy doing together and set aside a time to do that. My wife and I, one of the reasons we moved to where we moved is we live right by Swantner Park, right on the bay, and we take walks once or twice a week, sometimes 4 times a week. Together, we love doing that. And we talk. One thing we've taken up lately is as we get older, we'll bring out the chamomile tea and we'll do puzzles. We sit and do puzzles and we talk. As a man, I think I shared this last time, I learned how to shop. I don't shop like my wife shops. I'm hunting for the best deal that you can't pass up, right? I'm just hunting. I'm on the hunt. My wife shops, however women shop, but I still will go to this. You want to stop and walk through the store? Yeah. And it's enjoyable. We enjoy it together. But we figured out those things. My wife doesn't like to surf. My wife doesn't go jogging with me. My wife doesn't play disc golf. My wife would rather walk without our dogs. I love to walk with our dogs. It just goes on. The list of things that make us different and the excuses to not do things together is huge in my life. I'm the guy that wants to enjoy life as it comes. My wife always wants to make sure the house cleans and then enjoy life. Right? She's a responsible one. I'm like, hey, life's to live. The house will be dirty when we get home. It'll still be there, right? So we have this different attitude. But we really force ourselves to do things together. I love taking trips and drives with my wife because we have an extended amount of time in the car. A lot of times we're listening, I'm listening to a teaching, she's doing it, but we make sure to have time when we're just talking. And many times we're praying for extended amount of time on car drives. And any car drive in Texas is a long drive, right? It's good time. Let's go up to San Antonio, have dinner on the Riverwalk. Well, we got 5 hours of driving at least together, right? It's a good thing to set that time aside. When people say they can't do it, it's like, your first priority is your marriage, right? Your first priority is your marriage. And sometimes we've said, no, we're going to send our daughter over to your house so you can go on a date, to take care of your kids while you go on a date. You have to do it. So you're involved. That's so important. Again, having to do with forgiveness, right after that one, it says, do you bring up your future mate's past failures to win an argument?
I like to think of that one as a file cabinet. Men are very good, I think, at closing a file cabinet after an argument. A woman always has that file cabinet open and can pull files out at any given time of anything that's happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah. But don't be over, don't give men too much credit, because we're good at it too, But for us, normally we have the list, right? It's forgive. You normally don't forget. The more you try to forget, the more you remember, right? It's the way it works. But when we do it, we're not feeling it. But when a woman's doing that often, there's normally a root of bitterness that needs to be dealt with, is what I found, right? Because women are so much more in touch with their emotions, and their emotions go deeper, and they have a lot more of them. They tend to store things. And so you're right, man. They have them there, but guys have them. But guys are so prideful, we want to win the argument, so we'll throw it out there, and it hurts really bad when we do it. But that's something, that root of bitterness can happen to men or women. It often happens to women. But so when you forgive somebody, you're giving up the right to do this. It is such an unfair tool. And I think we talked about it last time. You're throwing logs on the fire that you're trying to put out. We literally, this happens, and we identify it. This is one of the biggest deals in the way that you communicate to resolve, right? Discuss to resolve instead of fight to win. This is one of the biggest no-nos. And so when it happens, I literally, it's been within the last year. I can't remember when it happened. And it's kind of rare that we actually have fights anymore. That's the goal for every marriage, because we've had so many. we figured out how to get away from them, but we try to communicate. And this fight had the potential, or this discussion had the potential to become a really bad fight. And my wife did that. And I go, whoa, yeah, let's stop right there. That's a completely separate topic. And you know what my wife said? Fair enough. And then she started talking about, she recognized it. We have these rules in place, and they're God's rules, not ours. You see what I'm saying? So immediately it's like it started to happen. I said something, and that didn't start a new fight. My wife goes, oh yeah, right, okay. See, so it's good to have the Bible as the standard, as the referee, as the umpire, right? And that was good. It was, and she didn't go, oh, you won that point. It wasn't like that. It was like, no, let's just stick to the rules, right? And then the next two after that, do you explode in anger? Stop the fight, take a break, and come back when you can talk. Exploding in anger does nothing but just completely stop communication. Mouth open, ears shut. Next one after that, do you refuse to listen because of the rage inside your heart? Has that ever happened to any of you? Now, if that happens, time out. Put yourself on time out. Take a walk, cool down, pray. Something other than continuing on. Do you refuse to listen because of your stubborn pride? Amen. All the time. This last one is kind of a specialized one, but I found myself doing it. Do you provoke your fiancé in order that you might have a reason to blame them due to his or her lack of self-control? I have found myself stirring up the pot to have my wife explode, even though I was wrong, to be able to blame her. So manipulative. Horrible. But I did recognize it, and I've repented of it, and I really try not to do it anyway, because I'm really good at needling, and if there's tension, I'll needle until she explodes, and now she's the bad one. And I'm the one that's at fault. So so the idea is that you stop on specific ones, but ones that you think are extra important. Did some of these resonate with you when I talked about them? That you guys go, yeah. Yeah, all of them. I'm the poster child.
How would you address, I guess, double standard? Because I found that a double standard is, when I recognize one, it unfortunately triggers that, like, I wanna, talk about it because they can usually trigger us to wanna fight more because if we're men, we wanna win, like we talked about. How would you address it without without letting the fire get bigger?
Yeah, so it's the same concept kind of in everything that we do. So a marriage isn't 50-50. A marriage is 100%, 100%. Yeah, so a marriage is 100% male, husband, 100% wife, wife. When I fail in my male side, I've failed. And when I do something right and my wife fails, I go to the Lord, and the Lord is the one that gives me the reward for doing the right thing. Now she can stop blaming me, and now she has to wrestle with God. We've talked about this before, right? So, double standards, in a sense, you got to kind of blind yourself to their double standard and let them figure it out. You do the right thing, and they can stop pointing. They're not fairly pointing their finger at you. You get out of the way. I think we talked about that last time. I like to get out of the way and let God deal with my wife, and he's awesome at it. Way better than I am. You see what I'm saying? So does that answer your question? Yes. We want to win. The problem is you can't win. You can just do what you do. That conversation, or last time, that illustration. She's 95% wrong. I'm only 5% wrong. The Lord asking me, how much of that 5% is your fault? So you're completely wrong, and you can apologize for it on your side of it. And it's never 95. But
That's something I heard years and years ago that's always stuck with me. I thought was neat, especially when it comes to your words. Going back a little bit there. Is a good example I heard a pastor say one time. When you're in an argument, think of yourself as a 2x4, and your words are nails that you're driving in that 2x4 against each other. And at the end, when you make everything up, you pull all the nails out, what's left? Holes. It's like, so your words are so important when you're arguing. You can hurt somebody that they may not be able to always forget that, and you're leaving that always behind.
Any other comments? So it kind of leads into number 4. You guys did your homework in number 4. I gave a lot of my perspective on lesson 4 to you last time. In the submitting to one another, in the 3 verses that I like to explain to people, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, husband head over the wife. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, husbands dwell with your wives with understanding as to the weaker vessel. And Ephesians chapter 5, wives submit to your husbands. You guys remember that teaching? So I give people a perspective because God says what he says. He says, wives, submit to your husbands. It is what it says, right? But for me, I like to understand why it says that and why in the world did God give man that leadership role? Because my wife keeps on telling me she's better at it. No, just kidding. But, it's just an interesting thing. So for me, I'm always asking why. So a lot of it, what I do in this particular situation is I let them go through the struggle of just going, okay, without any understanding. It says, wives, submit. But that's not fair. I go, lady, you said I do. And I will. You did. And that's your deal with God, right? I mean, that's a harsh thing, like just submit. The problem is in the understanding of the beauty of what God is doing here, right? And that's where I get into that explanation that just goes deeper. And when you embrace it inside the marriage, inside the home, you find happiness. Even though the world tells you you're crazy, you're not going to find happiness, do it my way. Well, what is your way? Well, suck the life out of the other person to make yourself happy and be as selfish as you can possibly be. And then when you run out of that energy, go find another. It's basically the world, right? You got to make me happy, and once you gain 10 pounds and you're not making me happy, I'm going to go find someone else. Oh, yeah, that's the way to do life. You know, you force your wife to be a man, and you force a man to be a woman, and then you're going to find happiness in that? You know, the world stinks at this stuff, and they tell us it is horrible. It isn't horrible. It is where every joy-filled, thriving marriage I've ever seen gets to. And it doesn't matter how intelligent and how accomplished the wife is. The attitude in the home does need to follow that, that standard. The man represents strength. Strength loves to be respected. The wife represents beauty. Beauty loves to be appreciated. And if you treat each other in that simple way and communicate to one another, given those basic things, you find success in marriage. And I'm still able to say, after 3 decades of marriage counseling and premarital counseling and dealing with people's lives, I have not found a happy marriage where the woman is in absolute rebellion against God's standard. I've never seen a happy woman. And I've never seen a happy man that has neglected his role in really forcefully, in a sense, loving his wife in the way that God wants him to do that, in the way that Jesus loves us. How often you see Jesus just railing on the disciples for being so stupid and ruining his day? Husbands, love your wives like Christ loves the church. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loves you. You know, like, it's heavy once you really think about it. It's so different than what the world thinks this means, you know. And again, man, when women respect their husbands, when my wife respects me, I'm putty in her hands. She doesn't manipulate me in that way, but she does understand that she's so much better off if I'm feeling respected. And I'm going to really, it just makes it so. So my goal is not to force my wife to respect me. If she does or doesn't, that's her problem. And I tell people this in marriage counseling. I was just telling my daughter the other day, and it wasn't with her husband, it was with someone else. And I said, let their problem be their problem. You do what you know to be right before the Lord. And the same is true in marriage, right? If my wife is disrespecting me, I still obey the Lord. I don't get back at her. I fulfill my role before the Lord. And even in those tough times, I'm blessed. The Lord blesses me, right? My wife is the same. When I'm going through a hard time, man, my wife picks it up. She's incredible at this. And sometimes my whole focus is on things at the church, crisis, people's lives, messes. And my wife, man, she just picks up the game triple time, and she doesn't get on my case about anything or whatever. She doesn't even expect anything. And I know how, and she's respecting the fact of what I do. And I'm fully neglecting her. But how does she do that? She does that because her ultimate strength is in the Lord, not in me. And she's doing what she's called to do. She's submitting to me, or she's respecting my role and my person and what I am. And it works out great when people are doing it. When people refuse to do things God's way, shipwreck. So one of the keys that I always emphasize is Ephesians 5:21. Anybody have that? Bible open.
Submitting to one another in the fear of God.
Okay. And so then I always explain that verse, right? I did explain it last time we were together, I think. But when you submit to one another, how can you do that? Isn't the wife supposed to submit to the man? No, the man's supposed to submit to the wife too. Because it says, submit yourselves one to another. Wasn't the man supposed to be the head of the home? Yeah, but you're still supposed to submit to one another. How does that happen? Well, the very next verse tells us how it's supposed to happen, but why? How is that submitting yourselves one to another? The illustration is a baby cries in the house. An infant is crying. What does everybody in the house do? Tend to the need. Everybody submits to that child. It's an infant. Does that child have any authority in that house to tell anybody what to do? The child just has a need, and what does everybody do? They submit to that need. And I dare say, men's love language is respect. And so when it says, wives, submit to your husbands, it's absolutely what the husband needs to thrive in that marriage. I mean, the Lord first, right? But in that relationship with his spouse, he needs it. If the man is told that he's a lousy father, a lousy provider, a lousy house taker, or house, fix-it man or whatever, he's going to spend more time at work, or be tempted to at least. Because at work, there's normally a professional atmosphere, especially if he has any authority. He'll have a secretary, oh, would you like coffee? What would you like me to do? And even though they're paid to respect him, he still recognizes it as respect. And it's a good thing. Culturally, the way it looks has changed. A lot more women work and stuff like that. I think men need to be real sensitive to that as well. One of the hard things, men's perspective is, men are men and they don't see the way women see the world, right? This is an observation. My wife cares much more about how our house looks. I'm much more worried if something's rotting in the rafters. I'm more worried about the structure. She's worried about the color of the paint. She's worried about, the couches. For me, we can buy one set of couches. If they're comfortable, I don't care how ratty they look. They're comfortable. And we keep on buying new couches. Well, I don't like the color of the old one anymore. They're perfectly fine, they don't creak or anything, they're great, they're comfy, I can sleep on them, But we're just very different in that way. So here's the thing, if husband and wife are working, and they come home, who by nature cares more about the house? And whether it's clean or not, normally? The wife normally cares more about the house, so who naturally is going to work more or harder in their nature when they get home? It's not fair, is it? It is what it is, though. The reality is, my wife gets home and she starts doing dishes and she starts moving stuff. She just starts doing it. I didn't ask her to do it. It's her nature, right? When children come along, who by nature, in a sense, feels more that nurturing towards the kids. So if a woman's working and then they come home, who ends up working harder on the kids? By nature. It's the wife, because it's in her nature to do so. And if the man's not going to do it, the wife will do it every time. By nature, women always fill in that gap. So if men aren't leading in the church, who ends up leading the church? Is it the women's fault for taking leadership positions, or is it the men's fault for refusing to do so? But it's weird. We as men, we're funny in that way because, and again, men have to choose to do things right by nature. By nature, we have to choose to be a good husband. God doesn't tell women to love their husbands because they do normally and naturally, unless something gets really bad or weird, right? They do naturally love. They've made this commitment, and women are better at that commitment naturally. I'm not saying men aren't good at it, but we actually have to choose to be good at it. And so I see it completely unfair that in today's culture, sometimes men demand that their wives work and make most of the money, and we put ourselves in a position where we have to. Now, sometimes, by the nature of our culture, women have to work, right? But I always told my wife, I'm not going to stop you from working, and I do know when we have kids, you're probably going to want to be with those kids. But see, here's the deal, honey. As much as I can, I'm going to work super hard. So whether you want to work or don't want to work, I understand you work hard. We had this agreement early on in marriage. And my wife has worked on and off throughout our marriage because we were planning a church. We were super poor, but she always had the kids as a priority in that. She was able to do that, and we survived. But we had one car. We lived in homes, and our first home was $97,000, and I couldn't even believe that we were able to buy that house. We don't live extravagantly. I bought a new truck that's 10 years old, right? It's like we are staying, and I do not want to force my wife. My wife right now makes $800 a month, and she works almost full-time at the church. But the only reason that happened is because we were going backwards when my daughters were in college, and so she's already doing the work, so we started paying her $800 a month. Is she worth a lot more? Absolutely. Absolutely, right? But she's like, oh, man. And I'm like, well, honey, if you really feel like you need to hand over, your responsibilities at the church here and not officially work at the church, then that's fine. We'll figure it out, right? But I know that if my wife was not working at the church, she'd still be working just as hard as I am, whatever she does, because it's her nature. See what I'm saying? And so when I start talking about children and stuff like that, it's like, it's okay. We are different. And I'm just telling you the tendency, but be careful. Because if you have a 4 or 5 bedroom home in a nice neighborhood and your children don't walk with God, you're going to be heartbroken. And you're going to want to trade that 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom home for a 2 bedroom shack in order to get those kids back, but you can't do it. See what I'm saying? And I really encourage people with that. But just the reality is we are different, we have different roles, and we respond differently in different situations. Again, leadership is not always, the man, like I know marriages where the woman has biblical degrees, like official biblical degrees and theological degrees. How in the world does a man lead his wife if his wife is way more knowledgeable about the Word of God? You follow God's standards. And the guy does what he's good at, and he tries to do everything that the Lord lays upon his heart to do. And if the wife is a biblical wife, she's receiving that, and she's not browbeating with him with her knowledge in the Word of God. And the incredible thing is, even though I got a doctorate degree in theology, and the other side of it, I taught algebra. My wife took it 4 times. I don't think she ever passed it. But you know what? My wife teaches me a lot about God because she sees God differently than I do. She experiences him as a woman, as that side of God, differently than I do, and I need to learn from her. And I absolutely do. I shared that with you a little bit last time. Right? So it does, and it can work out. And I've had guys that have been like pretty new believers marry someone that had actually been in full-time ministry. How do I lead? I go, dude, you're an awesome human being. Love your wife like Christ loves the church. Pray for her, pray with her, provide an environment where she can thrive, and you are the best leader you can possibly be. My former pastor used to tell me, he says, Rod, I don't want you to be good at everything. You may not be good at anything but one thing, finding other people that are good in specific areas and using them. If you're good at that one thing, you're the best person I could ever have. So for me, my job as a spiritual leader is to see my wife's strengths and encourage those strengths and give her opportunities to fulfill those areas where she's good. See what I'm saying? Like, it's a good thing. You know what? It's my job for my wife to grow. My wife likes to go to retreats and conferences. So what do I say? Well, I'll cancel events so I can take care of the kids so she can go off to a conference. I will sacrifice to make sure that she is able to continue to grow spiritually. So that's leadership in so many different ways. So a leader sacrifices, and a leader makes sure that those that he's leading are living their gifts and talents to the fullest. That's the best leader, right? So, any questions? I'll give you a few other things on this particular comments. Do you guys, so the idea is, do you guys feel comfortable going into a situation and explaining how this works to people in premarital in your life to say, yeah, I adore my wife. She's incredible. She's so good at so many things I'm not. But the beauty is she still respects me. And as, you know, and when push comes to shove on certain issues, yeah, she comes to me. You know, this is important to be able to say, no, it works. Because the world tells them in every way, through media, music, movies, it doesn't work this way. But you got to be able to tell them, yeah, it actually works. It's a beautiful thing. One of the things, back to words and communication, one of the things it says there in Ephesians chapter 5, it says, washing her in the water of the word. It was pointed out to me quite a few years ago now. Then when it says wash her in the water of the word, it's not the guy walking around the word with the word of God, reading it to his wife all the time. Now, it's good to read the word of God together, discuss it, be in Bible study together, so on and so forth, discuss your spirituality. My wife and I spend time talking to each other about what we're personally learning. That's kind of how we relate in that way. But that word there is the spoken word of God as opposed to the written word of God. It's not logos, it's rhema. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church, speaking to her basically like Jesus would speak to her, encouraging her, lifting her up, building her up, right? That's how a man is supposed to speak to his wife. Huge responsibilities on the man's side. We always get stuck up on the submission side, but the reality is being willing to die for your wife is pretty sacrificial, isn't it? Pretty heavy. One other thing, did you guys look at the marriage communication guidelines? This one? I let you know this is probably the greatest tool I have in marriage counseling right here. If you want more copies, I think we have it digitized now. We can send it to you. It's one of those things that belongs on your fridge. Be a ready listener. Do not answer till the other person has finished talking. If they're repeating themselves again and again, it's okay. You can step in and go, okay, I think I know what you're saying. Okay, that's true with counseling as well. Okay, I get the idea, right? But so often we jump in. Be slow to speak, think first. How many fights would be avoided if we actually thought before we spoke? Most, right? But then the second part says, speak in such a way that the other person can understand and accept what you say. Remember, my 4 big points are spiritual life first, in recognizing and embracing the differences in each other as male and female, communicating, third point is communicating given the truth of those differences, communicating in a way that the other person can receive it. Okay? And then fourth is grace and forgiveness. Speaking the truth in love, or speak the truth always, but do it in love. Do not exaggerate. Paul's a great example of this. He lamblasts the Corinthians for 15 chapters. But he spends the first chapter calling them saints, right? And talking about what they're good at. He does it. That's how Paul writes. Paul writes the blessings, the whys, and then the hows is what Paul does. He normally starts off, I thank God always in my remembrance of you. And he gives them a prayer, right? So be thankful first and then deal with the issues. It's a great way to communicate. Do not use silence to frustrate the other person. Explain why you're hesitant to talk at this time. That means if you're just going to explode and just rail, go, I'm not being silent to frustrate you. I just need to calm down a little bit so I don't say anything silly. For me, it's a walk. Honey, I'm not walking out to make you mad. I'm walking I'm going to pray before we talk. Okay? Those are wise things to do. But don't use it to frustrate them. What's wrong? Nothing. Really, what's wrong? Nothing. Do not become involved in quarrels. It's possible to disagree without quarreling. When it drops into a quarrel, that's when you say, time out, stop. Let's stop pushing through this and let's calm down and then we'll talk about it. Fighting to win doesn't work. Communicating to resolve is where you're trying to get. Do not respond in anger. Use a soft and kind response. This is you, in a sense, controlling the argument. You're not really controlling it. You're putting it back in the realm of reasonable. You're de-escalating instead of escalating. Escalating. Do not respond in anger. Use a soft and kind response. One of the greatest verses I love, I think it's Proverbs 15. Is it 15:1? Where it says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. A harsh answer stirs up anger. Again, living that one verse transform marriages, right? When you're in the wrong, admit it and ask for forgiveness. When someone confesses to you, tell them you forgive them and be sure it is forgotten. I don't like that phrase in there because the more you try to forget, the more you'll remember. But be sure you put it in that place where you're not allowed to use it in a derogatory way. Okay? Where you're not putting another log on the fire. You might need to explain forgiveness to people. I often use the verse where Peter asked Jesus, and I just view Peter like going in front of the other guys, watch this. The Lord's going to pat me on the back. And Peter goes, Lord, when someone has wronged me, do I forgive them 7 times? And the Lord sees what's happening, right? So he answers Peter, not 7 times, 70 times, 7 times. Right? But what he's saying is completely forgive. But to me, what that says is sometimes you need to forgive many, 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 many times before you stop picking it up and holding on to it like, I'm so angry at you. Like you pick it up and you coddle it instead of giving it away. Like forgiveness says, I'm giving up the right to hold this against this person in a derogatory way. Okay? Avoid nagging. Men are pesterers and women are naggers. We're both good at it, right? But men can pester. But women tend to nag more than men do. And the process, the way I understand it, why this happens more in women is given the nature of their differences and their observational skills. Right? So these observational skills make women amazing, but it also leads to certain problems. Here's how it happens with my wife and I. My wife is going to ask me a question, and she already has in her mind, the way her mind works, she already has the right response in mind. So there is a right answer and a right body response and a right tone that she is expecting back. And so when she asks the question and she doesn't get one of those 3 and very often matches up on none of them, or when she doesn't get all 3, she's going to rephrase the question or the statement to get the right response. And then if she doesn't get the right response then, because she has presupposed the response, she'll ask me again, and it's not always, it isn't like that. It's like, how many times are you going to ask me that question, honey? So I'm an under-responder, which drives my wife crazy. So she'll say something, and I'll be thinking about it, and I don't even respond. So the first time she does it, it's normally my fault. I haven't responded because I'm thinking about it. And then since I'm ADD, I'm thinking about it, I come to an answer, and I forget to give it back to her. So now she's still waiting on my answer. Then she repeats it, and I go, oh. And I think I've responded, and I haven't. Her thing is, you think you responded in your head, but you haven't, or whatever. But that, so our big joke, we laugh about this now because, again, it isn't that my wife is bad, she's just different, and that's why the Bible does focus on women in that area. It's better for a man to live on the edge of a rooftop than with a contentious woman, right? Because it drives a man crazy. So anyways, but it is, everything we have can be used for a blessing or for something bad, right? And so I always say this, men are extreme, right? Our testosterone starts wars, rape, molestation, murder, crime, right? As where women are way less, tend to be involved in those things. Men are way more, right? Because we're extreme with our testosterone, and we have to choose to use it in a great way, in a good way, right? And so testosterone, I always tell men, you got this awesome tool called testosterone, man. You got superpowers, as long as you're over here, because you're super villain if you're over here, right? But women are the same way. Women's superpowers are all that intuition and that observation and the insight and all the depth of thought that goes on, but with it comes problems, right? And many times it's that assumption, what the answer is going to be, and if you don't get it, you're going to try to get it, right? And so that happens a lot. So with my wife and I, we've recognized that over time, and so my wife will say something, and I don't respond because I'm thinking about it. I think I've responded, I haven't. So now she says it a second time. And if I'm still thinking about it, I'll say, duly noted and recorded. And I'll just keep on driving. It's normally when we're driving because we have too much time on our hands, I think. I don't know. But, and it's just funny because we start laughing. And I look at her and I go, I can hear you. Would you like me to repeat the question? Because she wants the answer. And it's like, that's my answer and I'm sticking with it. That's where we come down to, and it's just funny because now, again, something we would have fought over in the past, we now laugh at, but it is, learn to laugh at yourself, guys, because, and the funny thing is, stereotypes are stereotypes because there's normally a seed of truth, if not a lot of truth in the stereotype, right? So in counseling, you can laugh. I looked at a woman, probably within the last year. I was looking at her and I just laughing. I'm going, you have got to learn to stop being so negative. And she goes, I know, I'm trying. She's laughing at herself going, I'm trying, I can't help it, because she was just on her husband's case about everything, and she brought up something. I go, is that useful right now? She's like, no, I just can't help it. It's just so hard, but that was her nature. And I'm just laughing at her as we're saying it because we're sinful beings, and we're trying to do something godly, so it's okay to have levity. Everything isn't the end of the world. And the fact of the matter is, as much as you pour into people, if you have 6-8 weeks with them, they have a lifetime to work it out. And it's going to take a lifetime to work it out. See what I'm saying? And so my wife and I are not perfect at what we do. We've learned a lot over time, but we still laugh at ourselves at how dumb we are and how many times we break the rule, right? So anyway, so avoid nagging. 9, do not blame or criticize the other person, but restore them, encourage them, and edify them. And you guys can testify this to be true. There's nothing better than saying you're sorry and then just having the other person say, thank you. And it's gone, right? Like, it's gone? How good is that? That's like the best. And testify if this is true. It's horrible to say, I'm sorry. And they go, I forgive you. And they haven't. Isn't that the worst? It's like, I've done what I can do. I don't know what to do. And I'm still being held underneath. So that idea of teaching forgiveness, so when I forgive my wife, now the responsibility's on me to uphold what I said I just did. See what I'm saying? Like, it's now my responsibility. I said I forgive, therefore I need to actually forgive. The onus is now on me. And if I ask forgiveness and my wife forgives me, she's not allowed to continue to vibe me. Unless she really hasn't forgiven. Then she lied. She didn't forgive me. See what I'm saying? Like, this is a huge thing. So, I would, this idea of restoring people, encourage, edify them, lifting them up and not just continuing to go back in and telling them how bad they are. We got to allow each other the opportunity to grow, and it's a lifetime of growth. So how when I ask couples, well, how you doing? Oh, we're doing better this week. We only got in 2 fights this week. And we resolved them. Like, right on, man, victory, awesome. Oh, you got in 2 fights? I can't believe you're still fighting? Come on, we had a good session last time. They've been married 20 years. They've been fighting every day for 20 years, and all of a sudden they come to you once, and they're going to be better. No, you encourage. When people are in a fight, make sure that they actually resolve the fight, that forgiveness is real, that they're able to restore and move on. And we have actually gotten way better at it, and it's so funny because I trip out. Sometimes we'll get in a pretty intense discussion, and then we resolve it. And then we're like, okay, let's go out to dinner. Oh yeah, that'd be great, let's go. And it's completely gone, like, oh my gosh, that's so good. But our tendency is to want to still hold that person over the barrel, especially if they've asked for forgiveness. Because when people ask for forgiveness, what happens? They're admitting fault, aren't they? And then we want, oh yeah, so you really are, But you said you forgive them. Like, how does that work? So this idea of restoring and encouraging and lifting up and getting back to a good place. It's good. When we go through fights, if God wants to use all things for the good, we go through a battle, we need to expect that God can actually make our marriage better afterwards. And I've seen marital affairs heal and repair and make a marriage stronger, done God's way. I've seen lapses into drug use or pornography actually make the marriage stronger. You don't go out saying, oh, this is a tool to make my marriage stronger. No. But God can use all things, all failures, to still make the marriage stronger. So this idea of restoring and edifying and building and, okay. And then finally, try to understand the other person's opinion, make allowances for differences, be concerned about their interests. And this is where the explanation comes in. That question that you guys had early on, what are you fearful about as you enter into marriage? What are you fearful about as you enter into marriage? And so one of the responses I recently got was, and it's funny because this woman is extremely beautiful, and her husband's kind of a geek, right? Or her future husband's kind of a geek, right? And she's like, I'm worried that he just won't love me and appreciate me. And I'm looking at him going, he's like, oh, but she was fearful of that, I'm looking at the situation going, man, he's marrying so up. He's not thinking that at all, but that's a beautiful thing that God brought this guy that just is totally just thrilled that this beautiful accomplished woman would even like him, much less volunteer to marry him, be there to marry him. But when I heard that, I didn't say that to them, but when I heard that, I said, are you listening? I asked him, did you hear what she said? That's her greatest fear entering into marriage. The greatest blessing you can be to her is to make her feel secure in your love no matter what her whole life. That's your job. She just told you how to win her heart for the rest of her life right there. Listening. What do you need? So oftentimes, a woman will say, well, he could care less whether I have joy in the marriage. And then he looks at it and he goes, well, you should have joy. This is what I do and I do. And I'm looking at him going, what? Dude, you ought to be asking her what you can do to make her feel special instead of telling her why she should feel special. See what I'm saying? Like listening to the other person. And when you get to a point of saying something honestly and you're not listened to, what's going to happen the next time you say something honestly? You're pretty much not going to say it, right? And especially as men, we have such a hard time revealing our inner self. And for example, my wife is really not used to me being touchy-feely because I'm just not. So if I pull something deep out of me and I reveal it to her, and she goes, what, are you reaching your feminine side or what? What am I never going to do again? I'm never going to pull out my heart. And she just lost an opportunity, And so what I'm saying is, when the person shares their feeling, you really want to get people to try to understand that and that feeling. Or as a guy, many times we don't understand, right? Guys. But we need to acknowledge it as true, whether we understand it or not. See what I'm saying? This made me feel that way. Well, it shouldn't have. No, it made me feel this way. I'm being honest. This is what I'm saying. And with men, sometimes when they talk to their wives, because we're so weird about our need for respect, that we'll say, this made me feel disrespected, honey. And she looks at you, well, it shouldn't have. That's dumb. Like, what's your problem? She's not a man. She doesn't understand how men are. She just needs to acknowledge, okay, that made you feel disrespected. That's noted. How can I communicate that in a way that won't be that way? That would be a good follow-up question. So I don't understand the intricacies of my wife, and sometimes I have to ask her, what do you want me to do, or how would you like me to respond? And this is good in marriage, but it's good to teach young people early on to not just laugh off these little things as they're in love and they're having, a lot of sex for the first time, and it's kind of, we're in the honeymoon stage. To realize that, once these things get deeper, you need to maintain and you actually need to listen to the other person. And the amazing thing is, I don't know if my wife has learned new things about me in probably 25 years. But I'm still learning new things about my wife. Because she is detailed, intricate, delicate, beautiful, and I am pretty basic, strong, and straightforward, right? I'm learning new things about my wife because I'm listening better. Maybe she's been explaining them all along. Maybe they've been there, but I've learned to listen better and actually appreciate who she is and just going, whoa. And I think whole lives people ought to be going through that in a good marriage, right? So the difference is you're either growing closer together your whole life, or what happens? What do people always say? We've drifted apart. We've drifted apart. How do you stay? You're purposefully engaging in these things and you're following good standards within marriage, and you're going to be that old couple with the walkers in the mall holding pinkies. My wife, she's so hot. But that's the goal, right? And I can honestly say that I think my wife is absolutely beautiful. I don't care what anybody else thinks of her. Where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. And my heart is invested in my wife. She's beautiful. To me, I don't care what you guys think of her. But if you don't think she's beautiful, that's your problem. you're dumb, because I think she's beautiful, But, and these are things, that we just need to listen and understand. And I remember there was a time when we were going through like a really busy time, and my wife kind of shut down intimately with me. She got busy. And I was like, well, what's going on here? And we had a long talk on the way to a teaching engagement. And I actually started thinking about, not just as a guy, but why is intimacy with my wife important to me as a man? And I spent about 45 minutes just talking about how important it was to me, not just physically to have sex. But she actually listened and she goes, I had no idea. I just thought, you were kind of using me to have this pleasure. I didn't realize how important it was to you that we were intimate. And I'm like, whoa, maybe I should try to explain my heart a little bit more to my wife every once in a while, And ever since then, it really changed her view of my desire to be with her, which is greater than hers, so she doesn't understand it, right? But once she understood it, she's like, yeah, well, so then when I make love to my wife, she doesn't feel like I'm just floating my own boat. She feels like, no, I'm giving my husband this incredible gift, and it's good, and it all comes back to communication, right? So in every aspect, we really need to try to grow closer together, but it takes a lot of work, doesn't it? Right? It takes a lot of work. So anyways, any questions before we close? Okay, you're all going to have perfect marriages now, right? And be able to go save everybody else's marriage. So next time we're together, it's our fourth time. It's our last time. And so obviously we have these first four. I always tell people, and I put a little extra essay in there, and that's not as important as anything else. So that was on the back of 4. So you do 5, 6, and 7. We're going to go through 5 and 6 fairly quickly, spend a little bit more time on 7 next time. If you have questions, that'll be the time to ask, and then we can get them on the video as well for future people to watch who may have the same questions that you guys have. All right, any other questions at this point in time? Are you guys excited just to kind of meet with a couple and just talk with them and kind of try to figure out where they are and how you can help? I just got qualified as a mental health coach through the American Association of Christian Counselors, but it also certified me to be a first responder psychologically into a tragic zone. So basically doing triage when people are walking around under the effects of trauma, that stunned look. So I've been trained whether, someone is suicidal, whether they can just, go home and take a nap, or whether they need medical help, because that trauma can actually cause people to have a heart attack, I mean, you hear about that all the time, So I'm able to, or I've been trained to, I don't know if I'm any good at it, but to assess the situation. So I'm thinking, I want to go to some emergency somewhere. I got all this information. I want to use it before I lose it, right? Kind of thing. So, but anyways, all right, well, let's go ahead and pray. Dear God, we thank you for this time together, that you have provided this incredible thing called marriage, and you have provided us the blueprint on it, Lord. You've provided us the ability to understand it. And Lord, you have given us marriages where we've, I think all of us feel like we've maybe learned through error rather than obedience, but now we're able to obey. And Lord, may it be that our heart is, whether it be official or whether it be in a casual setting and not official, Lord, may we be those that bless others' marriages, God. May these marriages here be a blessing, and may they bless others with the wisdom and the knowledge that you're bringing through our time in your word, God. And we just pray that for certain, Calvary Chapel, the Coastlands has been, and we just pray that it continues to be a place where marriages are strengthened and many marriages are healed, God. And we pray that with this premarital and the potential for more premarital, Lord, that more marriages are set up for success, God, through the understanding of your word, Lord. I do pray for every single couple here, every single person here, that that they just learn how to inculcate your truth through their life and into other people's lives, Lord, without ever watering it down or changing it, God. But we're so diverse that you have so many different tools to minister to so many different people that we just understand holding clearly onto the principle, and you use our own personalities and experiences to fulfill your truth in people's lives. And so may it be that we understand that as well, God. We love you, we praise you, and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, God bless you guys.